What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Sweat It Out podcast.
If you want to be successful, look inside.
We don't like sitting in the discomfort.
Then all of a sudden that day came when I got $20 and 2 free drinks to do a show, and I was like, oh shit, here we go, baby. You know?
Thank God she hasn't caught a chicken yet, because she'll tear his head off.
Don't be soft.
That patience is key.
If all my friends are winning, then it's going to make me want to win more.
What is up, everybody? We have a very special guest coming all the way from Chicago. He's a videographer and published photographer, making content for fitness professionals, and he's got one of my favorite mottos to live by: be a fucking shark. Enrico Incarnati is on the pod today. What's going on, buddy?
Whoa. What's up, man? That was a hell of an intro. Thank you.
Listen, we have some practice, you know.
You guys have done this once or twice?
Couple times.
Maybe, right?
Couple times.
Yeah.
How you been, man?
I'm good, man. You and I were just talking off air about like how Miami humidity is suffocating, and I'm going to Vegas tomorrow in some dry heat, so I'm looking forward to that.
Make sure you bring some baby oil or some coconut oil, you know.
Cook it up a little bit.
Oh yeah, tons. I'm gonna be frying out there.
So, are you going out there for fun? Are you going out there for work? A little bit of both. What are you doing?
I'm going out there predominantly for work, and also fun. So I'm going out there to film. Are you guys familiar with Jason Phillips at all?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to film him. We're doing some vlog content, some other like businessy style content, and then we're gonna go see the McGregor fight on Saturday.
Awesome.
Who are you pulling for? Who are you pulling for?
McGregor all the way. And to be honest, I have never seen a UFC fight in person, and so I'm like stoked for this.
Yeah, I've never been in person, but you know, watching two fucking gladiators in the Coliseum, you know, can't beat that.
McGregor needs to redeem now, so you know he's gonna come in with heat.
Yeah, he needs to like attack and not be so passive. Like we
need the old McGregor.
Yeah,
we need the old McGregor.
We need the billionaire strut McGregor, the double chomp does whatever the fuck he wants McGregor. We need that.
Oh man, you know, I've been diving into a lot of your content lately, man, and I gotta say I'm super impressed and appreciative that, you know, you're out there really not only helping people like ourselves learn what a lot of videographers and a lot of photographers really do on the back end of things, right? But but also, you know, the mentality that really goes into, you know, being behind the camera. You know, obviously we know a lot about being in front of the camera, but it's a whole different animal, you know, having to actually frame and tell a story, you know, from behind the lens. And before we dive into, you know, the nitty gritty about, you know, your process and all that stuff, I want to take a step back and really talk about, you know, what got you into being passionate about videography, about photography, and you know, being on that side.
Yeah, man. So I actually never intended to be a videographer. I always wanted to be a pediatrician. And so I grew up here in Chicago, Illinois, and ever since high school, that's when I set my mind out to be like, I'm going to be a pediatrician. And I don't know if you guys are familiar. I've told this once or twice. Do you guys remember, like, you obviously have the ACT and the SAT, like in junior, senior, but then obviously sophomore and freshman year, you have like these tests that kind of give you a trajectory as to where you're going to be career wise. And they were called like the Explorer and the Plan test. And they didn't count against anything. It was just more so like a way to gauge like where you were at and what you wanted to be. And so I always would directly answer questions that would be like, okay, what would a doctor answer? And the main reason I did that was because I wanted to go back home to my father and be like, see, Dad, like I'm supposed to be a doctor. And just for that validation to him, to where he could be like, see, yep, my son is supposed to be a doctor. I knew it. And like, he can brag to all of his other friends, and my family would be able to see like, yep, Enrico's going to be a doctor. And so that's where the seed was planted of like, all right, Enrico's going to become a doctor. And so
the content doctor,
something like that. And so ever since then, since high school, that's where it was built in my mind. I'm going to be a doctor. Everything I do, I have to act and behave like a doctor. Even my father's friends and my mother's friends, like, you know, they would always refer to me as Enrico the doctor. And I'm like, I'm 17. I'm like, I'm nowhere near a doctor yet. But it was just the idea that like, this is what's going to happen for Enrico.
That's what they were instilling already.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of pressure to live up to. And like, so junior year, I became a certified nursing assistant, got my CNA license. senior year, I took like AP chemistry, fucking hated chemistry. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Whatever you want.
Listen,
bro.
I usually say fuck in the first 5 seconds, so you're good. I swear like a sailor.
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay. I mean, I lived in New York for 2 years and I grew up in Chicago, so this is amazing. So at obviously, like, junior, senior year, that's when I set my eyes on. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go to school. Went to DePaul University and enrolled in health sciences, and so obviously like enrolled back into the chemistry, all the fun stuff, right? And I found myself every time I would step into class, it was just heavy, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm super passionate about this. It wasn't like, it wasn't hard for me. It was just, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, something about the idea that I have to spend the next 10 years being a doctor when I could fill this time doing something else always intrigued me. I didn't know what that was, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do, which was being a doctor, right? And this is the beautiful thing that I think a lot of people will take away from is understanding what you don't want to do. You may not know what exactly you want to do in life, but it gives you clarity as to exactly what you don't want. And it gives you more clarity as to what you can achieve and what you do potentially want. Right. And so I knew I didn't want to be this doctor thing anymore, but I'm like, how do I tell my father? Right. That was the big thing. That was the big cloud over me, is like, how do I tell my dad I don't want to be a doctor anymore? And there was one piece of content that hit from Gary when he posted it. It was like, I would rather have 2 to 3 years of weird times with my parents than 80 years of resentment, right? Meaning I would rather say what I don't want to do and not appease my parents and have a short-term weird relationship with them, as opposed to appeasing them and regretting and resenting them for the next 80 years of my life, right? And so I had to have that conversation with my dad. And I'm like, Dad, listen, I love you, but I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, I don't want to. And it was like, okay, well then what are you going to do now? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out, right? And so at the time I was working at my school's gym. And this is when I was getting into fitness a lot more and bringing my gym bag with me to my chemistry lab. And I'm like, all right, after chem lab, right to the gym. And so working as a front desk supervisor, whatever. And around this time is when I started following like Christian Guzman, Max Tuning. And I saw that they were vlogging. And I'm like, what is this vlogging thing, right? I'm like, this just seems interesting. And at the time I was in a relationship and I was giving tips on like my Snapchat story. And my girlfriend at the time, she's like, why don't you make YouTube videos? And I'm like, all right. So I went that weekend to Best Buy, bought a GoPro. It was like the Hero 3. Didn't know what I was doing with it. Didn't know any settings, but I'm like, I'm just going to try. And literally I just made such a shitty YouTube video. And it was like my first YouTube video, me vlogging, making some oats, going to the gym. I look back on it. I'm like, man, we could have made so many different cuts now. But that's what started me picking up a camera. Is I'm like, this is interesting to me. This seems fun. And it's something that I want to go towards. And so during this time in college as well, so my girlfriend and I, we broke up. And mind you, there was a lot of like pressure on me still, because I was trying to get out of this identity, right? Trying to build this new identity. And there was a moment where I was in a really just dark headspace, like super anxious all the time. Like I was just fucking just depressed, didn't want to do anything. And so this is actually where I attempted suicide, was when I was in college, because it just came to a point where I'm like, fuck, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like mind you, even though I'm picking up a camera, I'm like, I still don't know what this is going to be, because that overlooming, how do I say, idea of me or person of me, Enrico the doctor, is no longer. And it's like, I have to live up to that. And there was a moment where I'm like, I don't think I can do that. Right. And it was one of those moments where like everything just crashed down on me, and it felt like, fuck, I don't know what to do anymore. And so that's the reason why I have this tattoo on me right here. It says Forza, which in Italian means strength. And so every time I look at it, it just reminds me like, hey, you can do hard things. You can be fucking strong and like, just, be a badass. And so that's obviously like I continued with vlogging, continued with, working out, fitness, and going through the motions of like, just communications, default major, didn't know what I was doing. And so that's how I started just getting into film and video. And then I know this is a long story. And so at this time, I saved up enough money in college, and I bought my first real camera. It was a Canon T5i, and I saved enough money again, like another 2 weeks went by, and I bought like a Rode video mic, and I was so happy. I'm like, I am a fucking vlogger now, right? I'm like, yo, I got a DSLR, I got the shotgun mic. I'm like, I'm legit. All right. And so I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to document my journey in school and whatever. And so I actually had to have hip surgery because I tore my hip that past year. And so I documented that whole process of, coming back and, getting stronger and whatever. And Christian Guzman, he had his summer shredding challenge. And so this was like the big turning point where
what year was this? Because I remember Christian Guzman had a few of these. What year was this?
So this was the first year when he announced, like,
because I followed him for a while. So
yeah, so this was when I think it was like 2018 when he announced Up Energy.
Okay.
Or 2017, I believe it was 2017. Yeah, so when he first announced, it was Up Energy, but then it got rebranded to 3D.
Yeah.
And that's when he had the first in-person summer shredding event. And so I did it, all the way from March, to like June. And then I flew down to Houston, and that was, when I met everyone that I followed and whatnot. And there was one person, Zach, his Instagram's The Flexible Lighting Lifestyle. And I had been following him, and I met him there. I'm like, yo, man, like, I know who you are, like, super cool to meet you. And shot him a DM. He sent me like one of his free ebooks. And so a month later, he was looking for a videographer to go to LA with him. And I like, man, I would love this.
And is this one of
like,
Christian's boys?
No.
Oh.
So Zach, he's separate. Like he's on his own. Like he's just, he's not like around the Christian like clique, he was another like influencer in that space, but he does a lot of like macro-friendly recipes and like puts a spin on stuff like that. And so I met him there, and mind you, we built a relationship. And so going back to him looking for a videographer, he reached out on a story, and I responded, I'm like, hey man, I would love this opportunity. And he's like, well, I got like 2 other people that are interested and they're more experienced. Like, why should I do? I'm like, because I'll work fucking harder than both of them combined. And the thing is with that, I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to use his camera, and he sent me the camera that he had. And I'm like, fuck, I don't know how to use this, but I'll figure it out. And so he literally told me, like, can you find a way to LA? I'm like, yep. So that day, booked a ticket, and 3 days later, I was out in LA with him filming for 5 days. And that ended up turning into a full-time position with him for the next year.
Wow.
And he and I worked together in Austin. I helped him film like his recipes. We filmed a lot of vlogs, YouTube stuff. And so after I was finished working with him, I went on my own to do some freelancing. And later that year, Jordan Syatt was looking for a videographer, and he put on his story in September, and he's like, looking for a videographer. And mind you,
what year is this now?
So this was 2018 now.
Okay.
And mind you, 2018, earlier that year, I had met Jordan at an event with Zach at a Pencils of Promise charity event. And I met him there and knew him because he coached Gary. And, I should be better with my chronological ordering. I'm sorry.
No, it's all
and
good.
So earlier that year, 2018, is when I met Jordan. And mind you, I just knew him because of Gary and shot him a DM, and didn't really think anything of it. Just kind of stayed in contact. So later that year of 2018 is when he was looking for a videographer. And he put on a story, same thing. I'm like, hey man, would love an opportunity. This would be amazing. And so he's like, hey man, I have someone lined up right now, but if that doesn't work out, I'll reach out to you. Didn't work out at all. I remember he called me. It was November 1st. I was on the Stairmaster at Lifetime Fitness. He called me. He's like, you want to move to New York City? I'm like, yep. He's like, really? He's like, you don't want to think about it? I'm like, nope, done. Like whatever it is. I'm like, whatever you want to pay me, I don't give a shit. Like, done. Let's do it. Right. And he was like, okay, man, I was thinking you're going to take like 2 to 3 days. And so later that month, I went out to New York City to work with him for like a weekend, just to kind of hang out, shoot the shit. And then 2 weeks later, I moved to New York City, and I worked with him for the next 2 years. And now I started my own production company. And that's what I'm doing right now. So that's the whole full circle.
That's the whole storyline. So how was it, obviously working with both names? What was it that you learned from the first influence you worked with, and then going with Jordan? What were the biggest takeaways from that transition, and then obviously to you open up your own production company?
Yeah, I mean, so working with Zach, it was cool because Zach was like, we were just starting to. He was also like trying to like build still, but he was pretty reputable. Like he built a little bit of a following, and like obviously trying to grow more. And what I learned with him was just like it's so interesting. Like there's a different aesthetic with filming food versus with filming like Jordan, for example. It's a person, right? And so what I realized working with Zach was sometimes it's more so about like the actual person and what their story is. And what was interesting working with him was like when we would vlog, like it didn't do as well because people were just like, just show me the fucking food. Like that's all I care about, right? literally people were like, I mean, it's cool, like we see you, but like show us just recipes, right? And so what we figured out was like, okay, playing to that strength, right? Like don't try to jam a square peg into a round hole. It's like if people want that and they're coming to you for that, like give that to them, right? And so that's what we really found is like, okay, cool, like this vlogging thing really isn't working right now. People just want these recipes and they want to see how to do it. So it's like, just go with that. Working with Jordan was, and I fucking love Jordan. He's a brother to me. Like, you know,
coming on the pod next month, I think.
Yeah.
Is he really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing. That'll be a good episode. And so Jordan and I, what we found out was like, you never know what piece of content is going to hit, right? And what we always looked at is every piece of content is just a test. It's not a pass or fail. Like, and mind you, you don't get graded on this. It's just a test. This isn't like, let's just throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what fucking sticks. No, it's every piece of content is a test. It isn't a pass or fail, meaning don't ever get too high if a content goes viral and don't ever get too low if one tanks. It's a test. You just keep posting, you keep posting, you keep posting. And what we were figuring out was when we first started, we wanted to try vlogging, right? So we did like 3 times a week, vlogging, YouTube videos. And it was just, it got to a point where it was just like, man, we can't keep up with this fucking pace of 3 times a week. We're just getting fried. So
sounds like us a lot with the pod.
So what we found out was Jordan works best being a teacher, right? Standing in front of a whiteboard and instructing people and acting as a teacher, because that's where he performs best. And so we're like, okay, let's go with this. Let's go with this medium. Let's go with this like type of style of content. And playing to his strength with that was huge, because that's where he shined best. That's where his best content was. That's where we were able to make like the most amount of micro clips from to be able to post on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and be able to really just showcase like who Jordan is. He's a trainer. He just wants to help you like fucking be in a calorie deficit, right? And
love that about him.
Yeah, his messaging is consistent, and that's something that I think a lot of people need to do a better job of, is like have a consistent message, but just dress it up differently.
Well, Gary Vee does the same thing too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and
that's
one
what
thing I learned.
That's what I was gonna ask you. Okay, I don't mean to stop you, but
No, go ahead.
Did would you say that like Jordan having coached trained Gary Vee, would you say that he also learned a lot from Gary when it comes to the content game and all that, or would you say that also Jordan learned a lot of stuff on his own?
So I know Jordan will echo this. It'll be funny actually to see like. I know what Jordan's going to say. So I bet you he'll say like, if you ask him the same thing, he'll be like, well, when you coach your clients, are you like, if you coach an accountant, are you asking them about accounting advice during your training session? It's like, no, you're just there to train them. But Gary was very visual with Jordan, where he's like, I want you to start posting 3 times a day on Instagram. And there was a time where it was a Sunday and Jordan only got 2 posts in, and Gary's like, you didn't post for the 3rd time today. And Jordan's like, how the fuck did you know? Like, are you actually watching? He's like, yes, like I know you didn't post for the 3rd time today. And so I think what Jordan would say and what he would take from that is, and mind you, he wasn't like, quizzing Gary on like all these questions.
For sure.
Jordan, very visual. He's just, he embodied what Gary says is, don't listen to what I say, watch what I do. Right. And so embodying that and just being like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not going to ask, I'm just going to see what he does. And I think seeing what someone does, much like Gary, and how he moves, it gives you such insight as to how, not necessarily how you should do things, but more so how you can like mold to start to do things. Right. And one thing that, I just lost my train of thought. Completely just lost my train of thought right now. Fuck.
We'll get it.
What was I going to say? I'm trying to think. What was I going to hit on?
Talking about Jordan emulating Gary's actions.
Yes. So this was the thing. Like when even I trained with him, right? And one thing that like I always saw Gary was doing is like he's always in his DMs. He's always commenting to people, responding to DMs. Like even though he says like working, like his whole like working motto, I think he's really changed his tone on that. But like he's always engaging with his community. He's always like nurturing people that are in his community that spend the time to what he says is like coming to the picnic or coming to the family party and you talk to them, right? And so he does a really good job of that, and Jordan does a phenomenal fucking job of that as well. Like whether it's in his DMs, commenting to people, but it's always like, hey, when you invite someone with a piece of content, like it's like inviting them to your house, you got to entertain them, and so that was one thing that I always saw from him, is that he's always like engaging with his audience and always like really nurturing them.
Mm-hmm. And on your end, right, from obviously you've been in the game for a while now, you've worked with some tremendous, coaches, influencers, that are really making an impact. When you see a trend in someone's content, right, that you're working with, and you're like, listen, we could really stick with this, and they might not want to go that route. How do you go about, teaching them like, hey, we should continue with this because it's really going to bring your page, it's going to really bring your brand the type of notoriety and the type of attention that you need in order to be successful?
And I also think since, you as a content creator, you're going to also see a different, you're going to have a different eye or viewpoint than maybe the actual person in front of the camera that's, displaying their knowledge or value. So I'm sure like you can give a lot of great information on that.
I think what it comes down to is an ego thing. I think a lot of people, they're so wrapped up and it's like, well, I've been doing it this exact same way for this long. And it's like, I don't want to change it up now, but it's like, okay, well, what's the goal here? Is it to get more clients? Is it to build an audience? Okay, cool. Then we need to make a pivot and actually like start doing it this way. Right. The exact, I can tell you when I was working with Jordan, right? When we were vlogging, it's like we weren't hitting as hard. When I say hitting, like we weren't reaching as many people as we could, as opposed to when we dialed it back and we really sat down and planned out each YouTube video. Like every video, I would say like minimum planning wise was like 3 hours of planning just for a video. Just from like the SEO aspect of it, from the, let's see like what title really works and all this. And it's like, okay, cool. But what we're thinking about is, okay, where are we meeting people at within their fitness journey, right? That's why whenever we title the video, whenever we looked up a video is, okay, how can we meet someone where they're at, right? And so when you think of content around that, it's like a lot of people that they focus on, well, I want content to be about me. And I want it to be about like, look at me lifting, look at me doing all this. Like, that's not fucking helping anyone. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to like trends in content, I think a lot of people want to hop on different trends because it's fancy and it's cool. But that's one thing that when I was working with Jordan, like we looked at, it's like, cool, we're going to do this and we're going to stick to it. We're not going to give a shit like what else is happening in the fitness world. It's like, we're going to focus on this style of content because it's working right now. And this is like, and we had to have that conversation, right? It's like, we could have pivoted to do vlogging because it's cool. Everybody's doing it, but it's like, no, that's not what's best for Jordan. What's best for him is where he shines, standing in front of a whiteboard, educating and being a teacher. So I think for a lot of people, they have to have that conversation with themselves of where do you really shine? Like if you struggle being on video, but you do podcast, don't force video, right? But if you ever want to work up to it, amazing. But if something's working right now for you, absolutely 100,000% capitalize on it. Don't let that go.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome advice.
And I think, we talk about it all the time is meeting someone where they're at, right? And then building from that with what we do with Mendes with his business coaching and what I do with the actual health and fitness side of things is you got to meet people where they're at and then, obviously have these honest conversations that are going to lead them in the direction that you both want them to head into, And I think, you mentioned it as like these trends that a lot of people are going down, and more importantly, right, is having content that speaks to your audience. Coming up with a plan, again, because nobody really gives a shit if I'm sitting there and deadlifting 405. Nobody cares. Okay, cool, it might look good. If I do a backflip, all right, great. I mean, I can't do a backflip, but if I was going to do a backflip, like, sure, whatever, I might get a couple thousand views, but who's that really helping, right? How do you, as a videographer, help your clientele, right, the people who you're working with, understand their target audience and understand the messaging that goes into actually helping them achieve their goals?
And also to like, how do you highlight or how do you showcase their strengths and their weaknesses to them?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'll answer the first one where, so one thing when it comes to like creating content, and actually now I'm thinking about it, like strengths and weaknesses. I think for some people it's going through that test period of like, hey, let's try this out, right? Like let's just see what this looks like. I think for some people, what comes to my mind is like YouTube, right? Where it's like, let's vlog, or let's just do sit down style videos, or let's just do talking head, like whatever that is. And I think there has to be a period of, we have to test that out to see, okay, it's like, do you like this style of content? Because ultimately at the end of the day, it's like, if you don't enjoy making it, then it's going to come across in your messaging. You're not going to be as clear about it because you're thinking about, like, how do I look on camera? And is this angle good? It's like, then you start overthinking things. So the one thing that is so huge is, test it out, get a feel for it. If it doesn't work for you, amazing, pivot, make a different style of content, but don't change your messaging. Right now, Josh, what was your question again? I want to make sure I highlight that.
About how you can help your clientele or the people who you are working with really understand their target audience and then coming up with a message that's going to attract those people so that you can actually help them accomplish their goals.
So the one thing that I learned when it comes to messaging is look at how many times you're using the word you versus I, right? Especially in your captions. If you want to make it about someone else, meaning like if you're speaking to them about a piece of content, like let's say how to lose the last 10 pounds, right? That's a really good clickbait title. How to lose like the last 10 pounds. Now, if you're speaking to them where it's like, well, I can tell you how I lost the last 10 pounds because I did this. Like no one cares. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, show them the possibility of like, hey, are you struggling to lose the last 10 pounds? Like, are you frustrated with your progress? Are you constantly changing your diet, right? It's like you're hitting on all these different pain points where it's like, yeah, that is me. I'm doing that. That's where I'm at. Or if you talk about like hormones, because I work with someone who he's big on like hormones, gut, everything. So he does a really good job at articulating his message around people who struggle with gut health. And because he struggled with it, right? I think the best type of content you can make is the content that you struggle with because you know exactly the pain points, you know exactly what it was like, but you also know the possibilities because you're that living proof for people. And so speaking from that place, speaking from a place of experience is super helpful because you can show people, hey, I know where you're at right now and I know what that feels like, but I'm also a living proof to where you can, and I'm going to show you how to do it, you know?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, it's super crucial for you know, your messaging standpoint and you know, to be able to attract the right type of people, you know, that are going to eventually, you know, hopefully buy your products and your services.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm another believer too, like I, you know, and I would love to hear your take, but especially when you're starting off, like I believe like a lot of people go crazy and they try to be on every single platform and they have to figure out where is that audience in that platform that they're here to serve and start with that, and then you can expand. Are you somebody that advocates that, and like how do you help those other people who maybe are trying to grow in their space and want to become this influence in whatever it is they're trying to do? How do you guide them to figure out what's the best platform for them to start on, or maybe there's two, but which ones are the best ones for them to start on and then expand?
This is now we're getting into my favorite stuff. So I'm always a fan of starting out with long form platforms, whether that's YouTube, podcasting, much like you guys are doing, which are fucking crushing, or article writing, right? Now, however you deliver your message, whether that's with YouTube videos, podcasting, or article writing, you need to expect, or you need to dedicate at least 1 to 2 years and expect nothing from it, right? Now, this isn't to say that we should ignore other channels. This isn't to say, okay, well, if I'm going to post on YouTube once a week, right? Now, let's think about it. If you're going to go 1 time a week on YouTube, that's 52 videos in a year, right? If you're going to go twice a week on YouTube, that's 104 videos. Much like weight loss, when people are like, well, a pound a week, that's not a lot. It's like, that's 52 pounds in a fucking year, Janice. It's a lot, right? It's like, come on, Janice. It's like, right. So it's like when we think about content from that perspective, it's the long game. Baby. It's the long game. But what people need to understand is like, put out content that's going to help someone, but don't expect shit for a long time, especially with long form content, right? Because that takes a lot more time to plan. There's a lot more time investment. We've been going for 35 minutes almost, right? So it's like, there's a lot of time up front that you're not going to see a lot of investment on like right away, but you have to understand when it comes to long form, those are what I call planting seeds, right? That initial content, those super helpful, like super SEOable topics, like the how-to videos, the 3 best tips to lose fat, whatever, like those are all seed planting type videos. Because essentially what that's going to do, YouTube over time will help that grow from an SEO perspective. But what you can always do is you always have that content evergreen. And whenever you do a Q&A on your story and hey, like if someone asks, hey, like what are the 3 best foods for fat loss or whatever the hell? And it's like, oh, swipe up, watch this video that I have. Now what you're doing is you're adding some fertilizer to that video, right? Like you're feeding it more, you're getting more eyes on it. So I'm always a fan of starting out with long form and let the rest take care of itself. Now, when it comes to Instagram, TikTok, all these other platforms, a lot of people are like, well, I got to do all this at once. It's like, well, you need to be present on all of them, but you need to be intentional on some. So for YouTube, Jordan and I in all of 2019, we're going to go hard on YouTube. And mind you, we didn't post as much as on podcast, right? The podcast took a hit, but we were okay with that because we understood YouTube is our goal. That's our primary focus. Instagram, we didn't post as much on Instagram because we didn't need to focus on the short form. TikTok didn't really go hard on that, right? Because our goal was YouTube. And we're like, we're going to go hard on this for 1 year and then we'll make a pivot. And for all of 2020, Jordan's big goal was the podcast. Because we did such a good job with YouTube, grew it to 150K. Then it was the podcast, right? So then it was, let's film podcast, cut clips from the podcast, push people on from the the short form channels like Instagram and TikTok and all that, Facebook, push them to the YouTube video, right? So you have to also understand and be okay with not posting as much or not showing up as much on these other platforms because your goal is this one, and it has to start with the long form.
I love that we're talking about this because I think it is important. That's something I used to deal with a lot, right? Dabbling with too many things at once. And I think that's people when they first start, you got to focus on one and put all your energy. Doesn't mean that you can have some of your little bit of your hands in other areas, but you have to pick one that you got to go all in and give it your most attention, right? Because that's how you're gonna strive, right? How are you gonna be able to become great in all these other ones if you can't even become great in one first, right? So become great in one first and then expand, which I like. And I think, especially if you're talking about long form content with YouTube, like even now, like one of my main goals is really push into YouTube. Me and my content creator director, we're doing that.
Your content director.
I said ours.
I get very jealous.
This guy over here. So great thing about YouTube, it's like I compare it to real estate. Like YouTube is like real estate. It is that evergreen because each video is like a house, right? Each video is a house. And when you buy real estate, unless you're flipping, but it's not really a game of I'm going to make a huge profit right away. It's a game of waiting, right? It's a game of waiting, and you have to wait years and years, and then you start making money off of those houses the way you do with those videos. Like, you hear the stories of like, man, that video that I had blew up 2 years later, and now I'm making money off that video. So it's just crazy. Like, that's the beautiful thing I think I see about YouTube. And I want to know your take. Like, where do you think YouTube is going to go now with YouTube Shorts and all this stuff, especially you being an advocate of YouTube? Is that something that you're excited about? Is that the one platform that you see is going to be holding its most dominance over the other ones?
So, and we've even been seeing this, like even the other day, like with the Instagram CEO, he came out and said like Instagram is now a video platform, right? He literally said like it's no longer a photo platform, it's a video platform. So this is why I'm so fucking huge on video content, because I mean, besides a podcast, right? Like people are listening to us from an audio perspective, but what better way to see someone's demeanor, see someone's emotion than video, right? And it's like the best way to, I would say, build a relationship with someone is through video. I think that's why I'm so connected to someone like a Max Tuning, someone like a Christian Guzman, is because I've seen like they've given me access to their life, right? They have given me access into what they do. They've given me access into the foods they eat. All these little things that we look at as it doesn't matter, but it's like it's all connection based.
100%.
Building a brand, building an audience, building loyalty and trust through video, I would say needs to be everyone's priority. And I saw a statistic, I don't know where it was, but this sounds so incredible now. But I saw one, it was last year. It was saying that like by the year 2023, that 83% of all marketing will be done through video. Right. And so I'm like, holy shit. Right. Like, and now it makes sense when the Instagram CEO comes out and says like Instagram's a video platform, where reels are now huge, where TikToks are now huge, YouTube Shorts are coming out, right? So all these platforms are all competing now, and I think YouTube and Instagram took awareness. So like, oh shit, like people are not spending as much time on our platforms; they're going to TikTok, right? But that's why they make an adjustment, come out with reels, they come out with shorts, because it's like we need to compete, right? And so I think video for the future is going to be the absolute frontier.
And even do like even content on the side of things, like you look at like streaming, like FaceTime streaming, Zoom streaming, even in like when you're in person with somebody, it's like even Josh says, I love FaceTiming people because I want to see their expressions. I want to see their tonality. I want to see what they're doing, right? And experience that, because when it does come to sales and when it comes to like getting message across, there's nothing that beats seeing somebody like this right in front of you. Even doing this podcast, if we couldn't see you, it'd probably be a different experience. But the fact that we can see you, see your expressions, the way you're excited to talk about this, it drives a different energy.
Oh, 100%. And, I want to piggyback off of that. And, we've been obviously mentioning TikTok. And I think, from a personal standpoint with you, man, is like you bring that energy into your TikTok. You know what I mean? Like I appreciate it. Your TikTok channel is like one of my favorites to watch, especially from like a content creator standpoint, because not only do we get to see some real high energy, but I feel like, we've talked a couple of times on Instagram and, through text message, and obviously now on here, but I feel like I already know you pretty well, like about your character and, your personality through your ability to show who you really are on TikTok through, your personal experiences, the things that you're going through with your clientele, as well as, these little short I guess we could call them like mini skits that you do, you know, which are pretty popular on TikTok and on Reels right now, you know, like the client coach perspective or client videographer perspective. You know, how do you be able to display who, you know, Enrico really is while still having to, you know, kind of pour it out into the masses? It's not always comfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, dude, like you'll catch me on the off chance, like on my Instagram story, I'll be singing Justin Bieber songs, right? Because I'm such a massive Justin Bieber fan. Yeah, I love Justin Bieber. That's actually why I have a purpose tattoo. So what like something that I realize is like, hey man, like I had a yourself where it's like people are gonna judge you no matter what. You know, it's like you might as well have fun being you and like let people judge you, but at least you got to be you, right? And I've always embodied the idea of like always having, and it mind you, it took time, right? This is why I think I'm like so comfortable being on camera, but also behind the camera. It's because I get it. Like I get what it feels like being uncomfortable on camera. I get what it feels like being behind the camera too. So I can have both those perspectives. But it took a long time to where it's like starting to share little sprinkles of your life towards like, oh, I'm gonna try this out, and like someone might laugh at this, someone might be like, dude, you're a fucking idiot for singing Justin Bieber, like who cares, you know? But like more often than not, people are like, I love that song, and like that's so cool. I love Justin Bieber too. Or like all these little things about my life that I want to share. It's like I always say, if you follow me, like within the first week, you'll know that I love cannolis, I love espresso, I love corgis, I love fucking sharks, right? Because those are things that are my core, that make me, right? And it's like, those are all the little things that I want people to be able to connect with and like relate with me on, or just find some semblance of like, hey, like I really relate to that, you know? And I think it takes time. It takes time with like being able to share little pieces of your life. Not everyone's going to be immediately like, well, let me talk about anxiety and depression that I went through, right? Like it wasn't easy for me to make a video talking about like, well, here's a time where I attempted suicide, right? But the main reason I did that is because I know someone's going to need to fucking hear that, right? Now, I'm a big proponent of speaking about mental health and, you know, being an advocate for it. But I'm also an advocate for you actually making change, right? I'm also an advocate for you to go see a therapist, right? I don't want you to just sit there. I want you to take action because I want you to become a better person, right? And so that for me it was hard, right? Because one thing is I'm not a therapist, and I make it damn clear. I'm like, hey, I just speak from experience, and I want to make this abundantly clear, but this is a part of my life that I want to share with you because I'd be lying to myself if I didn't. This is something that I'm going through, and I know that the best way to build a connection is to be open and honest with someone and be like, hey, I'm going through this. Maybe you can relate to it too. Maybe you can't, but I just want to let you know I'm putting it out there to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
you know, being able to understand that there are always going to be haters out there, right? There's always going to be people there that really doubt you. And I know our content director, she's behind the camera right now. She's going to be laughing her ass off. But I used to, I mean, still to this day, sometimes I do, like stutter, right? Or I tend to fail to enunciate my words properly because I'm like like we were talking about, I swear like a sailor, right? I'm a redneck from upstate New York. And it wasn't until she's like, you swear a lot when we talk. I'm like, yeah. She's like, but you never swear when I'm shooting you. I'm like, yeah, because I feel like people don't want to hear that. And she's like, but you have a lot of clients, right? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, well, do they give a fuck if you swear? I'm like, no. She's like, then why don't you swear? And then the second I start saying fuck and shit and, you know, all this stuff, I'm like, oh, I feel like myself again. I'm like, I can, you know, I feel normal. I feel comfortable. And it shows in the content, right?
Yep.
You know, I still get messages this day of people being like, well, you shouldn't say fuck and you shouldn't swear and you shouldn't do this. I'm like, okay, thanks. Appreciate your tips. Like with your 300 followers. Thanks. You know, like I'm not worried about that, you know,
not for
like
everybody, man. And you're only for the people you're supposed to be there for. That's it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's something too, where, when Jordan and I first introduced, you guys remember that, like that Kenzie character where he wore a wig?
Oh, it's so good.
Yes.
So that when we were going to introduce that was like oh shit, okay, this is new. But like Jordan just loves to be like that. He loves to be a comedian, and he wants to be like, hey, I don't want to just be some coach that's spewing off like, well, you know, actually cardio, you should, like, he's like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. He's like, I want to be I want to entertain people with it, but I also want to educate them with it. And I think a side note, if you're a creator and you can entertain and educate people at the exact same time, you hit a fucking gold mine. So figuring out how to do that, you hit a gold mine. So that's where Jordan and I, we were introducing the character, and he's like, fuck, I don't know how this is going to do. Like, this is something that it's totally new. like, we're going to go for it. Right. And mind you, it got such a great response that over time, whenever Jordan would do stuff, people were like, oh my God, can you do a skit with Kenzie? Right. because what you're doing is you're building that relationship with your audience. Now, like, you have these other characters, these alter egos of you that people are so fucking invested in that they're like, oh my God, can we see more of this? You know, but it's like, you build up this little story within your community and they're like, they want to see the Kenzie Morgans. They want to see the Johnny Bag of Donuts, or, you know, they want to see the Australian guy that we came up with. His character name was Dick Tiny. So that, but like, mind you, we didn't know how any of this would have done, but we're like, we're just going to go for it, you know?
I mean, even, well, kind of, you know, on that same, you know, trend is he takes his, you know, he's going through a cut right now. Obviously, I think he's, you know, I think he's got like a jiu-jitsu competition or something coming up. So he's going through this cut and he takes, you know, what would be a very average, just like, okay, listen, here's my weight loss for the day, or here's my trend that I'm going down. And he like starts sticking these objects in his pants because people were like, hey, I can see your dick. And he's like, yeah, well, you know, I think this might be my dick, or it might be my laptop, or like this might be a plastic bowl. You know, it's like being entertaining in you know, the not so obvious way that people would normally expect out of you. I think, you know,
in a non-forceful way,
right? Really allows people like, okay, man, he or she are being themselves, you know, and they're having fun with it. And really, I feel like that's what people want out of us as you know, content creators, as quote unquote influencers. I fucking hate that word, but you know, they want to see us enjoying doing what we do, right?
Yep.
In order to help them enjoy what they want to do. You know, and if we're miserable creating a YouTube video or a TikTok, you know, it's going to come out and it's not going to inspire people to go out there and like you said, take action in their own life.
Yep. And that's a big reason behind my whole motto, like, be a fucking shark, is like, I want you to be unapologetically you, because sharks just don't give a fuck. They like, this is my motto too, where it's like, sharks, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, like, well, sharks don't have time to worry about what other fish are thinking about them because they're too worried about just being a fucking shark. Yeah. Right. And so one thing too that I always like to say is sharks physically can't swim backwards because they'll die. Right. And so my motto behind that is like, just keep going forward, meaning you'll probably have some other people like hating on you, throwing some shit at you, where it's like, I can't believe you're doing this. Keep going forward. You know your intention behind it. You know your purpose, and you're like, cool. I'm out to help people. I'm out to serve people. I'm out to educate, entertain, whatever it is. Fuck what everybody else thinks.
Boom. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, that's such a great motto.
Oh, hell yeah.
You know?
Well, you have to have that shark mentality, you know, because it's easy to get distracted or hear the noise and, you know, deviate off the path and then start turning away and go backwards, right? Family, friends, co-workers, acquaintances, audience members, you know, even when people do rebrands, right? When somebody rebrand, oh, but I don't like that you rebranded. Oh, but why are you doing this now? Or, but why, right? Or why are you going into that where you should have stayed doing this, right? Who cares?
Well, it also gives you an opportunity, right? Okay, so those people don't want to follow you anymore. They don't want to like your content. Well, great. There are plenty of, you know, to, you know, continue with the shark analogy, right? It's like there's plenty of fish in the sea, right? You're just going to attract a totally different audience, and that audience is probably going to be better for you because it's something that you also want to get into, right? It's part of who you really are, your identity, right? And you finding that ideal avatar, right, because you are your authentic self, you know, will only allow you to attract more of the people that you truly want, that are going to get benefit out of the content that 100%. You're producing.
So, brother, I got 2 questions for you. What are you looking forward to the most in the content world from now going into 2022? And what do you feel is going to be the most impactful thing that you're going to see is going to come for all these creators?
Man, that is a phenomenal question. In terms of like from a content world, I would say I'm really excited to see like more people shifting towards video and not just relying solely on photo, because and you guys both do a phenomenal job with this, right? It's easy to just put up a tweet post and be like, okay, cool, like clap my hands, done. I did my due diligence for the day. But I think when platforms stop rewarding that, and maybe they will, but and again, I don't know, but the fact that Instagram came out and said it's predominantly a video platform gives some insight as to where they want to see their creators go. So I think it'll be interesting to really see people really push the boundaries and be like, okay, I got to start getting creative with my content. I have to really start packaging it differently, putting a different type of dress on it, putting a different shirt on it. And like, it's the same message, but I got to present it differently. Right. And I think it'll be super interesting to really see people get creative and push beyond like the bounds of, well, I'm just going to put up a tweet post just to say it's done and whatever. It's like, no. I want you to actually get creative, like actually showcase your passion with your content. Because here's the thing, video will never lie. Meaning when you see like Josh, where it's like, it'll come across in the video. So if you're just putting up a tweet post to put it up, but you're putting a video up and you're not that passionate about it, it's going to come across. True. And so to really push the boundaries and to really like get excited about making a video, I think it'll be super interesting to see like how a lot of people attack it.
Love that. Love that.
Man, I think there's no better way than that to wrap it up today. You know, I mean, we really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insight. Obviously, you know, we value the type of content that you're producing, not only for other people, but for yourself, and, you know, showing those newcomers who may want to be videographers a better way of doing things than maybe you or our content creator, Kirsten, had to learn in the past, right? And she's giving a little shout out to Kirsten back there, but
shout out to Kirsten. Woo! Can I ask you guys a question?
Yes, of course.
Do you guys have YouTube channels?
Yes.
So do you have like your individual, but then you also have like a sweated out one, or do you guys have like one you guys do together at all?
Not together. We probably should start one.
We have the sweated out. We have our individuals. We were gonna do a page. We were gonna talking about the Patreon thing.
Yeah.
That was really the only content we were gonna do together outside of the sweated out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should maybe think about doing a YouTube channel.
Because I know you guys talked about like wanting to do more YouTube. Like when's the goal for you to like start doing more YouTube consistently, and are you doing it consistently?
I mean,
together or personally?
Both.
I mean, Mendez has already really started. I'm gonna start. You know, 2022. I went through a pretty big rebrand in April. You know, to make it more personalized about myself, and you know, to be able to kind of shift the type of dynamic that I'm going for in my coaching philosophy. So really heading into 2022, that's when I plan on starting a lot more YouTube. I'm getting TikTok rolling right now. I mean, obviously you see a lot of my TikTok content going up now. So, you know, focusing on that, keeping the Instagram rolling. And then 2022, he's been crushing it though with the YouTube videos.
Well, we've been doing one a week. And we even did the first vlog. That was exciting. That was awesome experience. Because I was doing a lot more like teaching on a whiteboard or like just talking in the front of the camera. Then we tried the vlog. We're gonna see how that goes. So we're like testing right now, seeing what's hitting, what's not, seeing what people also topic wise too, which we're starting to get some hints off that. And then, you know, like with TikTok, that was another one that we want to pay attention to, but right now we've been just repurposing a lot of content I have on IG just to stay afloat, right? Just to stay relevant. And then I think really the YouTube has made my main focus, not really wanting to disrupt YouTube and then start disrupting TikTok. Around we start seeing, okay, this is what's working on YouTube. Now we know. And then, okay, what other new content can we create specific for TikTok that's not just, you know, repurposing some of the stuff we're using now, but at least that keeps me afloat there and relevant. And that's kind of how I've been taking it now, and seeing where that goes, you know. So we're excited to see that. And if obviously if there's any opinions of yours when it comes to us doing something else together on YouTube or anything, we'd be more than happy to hear.
I think it'd be dope if, like, obviously you guys said you have the Sweated Out YouTube channel. I think that'd be super cool. Like, and then you guys cut clips from that, which I'm sure you guys do already. But I think where my mind goes, it's kind of like I don't know if you know who Cody Ko is at all, and Noel Miller.
Cody Ko, no.
So they started out on Vine a long time ago, but now they have like a YouTube channel and they do well. So they have a podcast. It's called the Tiny Meat Gang Podcast, and their setup is super well done. And like, if you want the rest of the episode, it goes to the Patreon. And so I just think it's super cool. And that's like where my mind goes with YouTube, because I think you guys are both great personalities, and I think it'd crush.
I know another, he always trashes me for this, but I'm really into like men's fashion. And there's a podcast. They used to be they used to be affiliated with Barstool, and now they're not. The podcast is called Throwing Fits, and they do the same thing. They cut the episode in half, and the first half's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and then the other half's on Patreon. They do after hour stuff. So
that's cool. No, I'm definitely I definitely think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Now I have another question for you.
Man.
Based on what you've seen from Josh, from my stuff, based on what you've seen. And this is us wanting to know your opinion. What do you feel is our strengths, and what do you feel is our weaknesses?
I would say both of your strengths are you guys are really comfortable being on camera. I think you both do a great job of like delivering a message with a talking head video. Like there isn't, and Josh, even though you were talking about like how like you stuttering and everything, I don't see that at all.
She does a good job with the quick cuts.
You're like, yeah, let's cut this out, cut it out. No, I think you guys do both a great job of like getting your messaging across, where it's like you have your Savage Mondays and like that's like a constant theme, right? Like you guys have these consistent themes. You also have consistent level of quality. I mean, with Josh, like I don't know where that one spot is where you're working out, but like there's this downlighting that is just heavenly. If you know what I'm talking about, I don't know.
Yeah,
where
my boys' gym on South Beach. Shout out Circuit Academy.
Shout out Circuit Academy. I need to go visit there now.
Yeah, for sure.
It's beautiful. So I think you guys continue to crush that. I mean, I'm trying to think like weaknesses.
Or things that you feel that we can add on or improve on.
Man, I would just say volume, like just more of it, you know? I think like on TikTok, if you guys can at least swing, I mean, if you guys have a creative director, there's no reason why you guys can't be on TikTok 3 to 4 times a day, like each of you. And then even on Instagram, like doing more reels, because I think obviously that's where the platform's going to tend to go. You guys, I mean, I don't know, you guys are just checking the box and you guys are doing really well.
Appreciate it, man.
And what are you seeing? Appreciate that, man. And what are you seeing as far as like, and obviously the more content you post, obviously it does better, but of course you want it to be, you know, meaningful, intentional, quality. You just want to throw something random, but what are you seeing is that sweet number when it comes to like IG, YouTube, TikTok, as far as like per day, in content for you to do really well, to like really speed up the process?
So I think a lot of people, they look at Gary and they're like, you know, when he came out and said like 100 pieces of content a day, mind you, he also has a 30-person team for his content, right? Like he has 3 people on his IG team just alone. So I think what I always say this, and I always say this to the people that have a camera and it's like, well, I'm just filming on my iPhone. It's like, is that okay? It's like, well, if that's going to allow you to be the most consistent as opposed to getting a $3,000 camera that just sits there because you don't know how the fuck to use it, I'd rather you use your iPhone and be ruthlessly consistent with that. That's the exact same thing I tell the people when it comes to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever is going to allow you to be the most consistent and sustainable to where you enjoy it. You don't start to resent it. Meaning if that's one time a day on Instagram, cool. If that's one time a week on YouTube or twice a week on YouTube, cool. Whatever can allow you to be most consistent and stay to a schedule with that, right? Not necessarily have to be so strict where it's like 9 a.m. Wednesday, I got to post a YouTube video. And if it doesn't go up, if it goes up at 10, it's a fail. No, Wednesday is your day. Make it your day. And it's like, don't ever deviate from that. Again, whatever can allow you to be the most consistent and create a sustainable content calendar or schedule is going to win.
Yeah, people have to rely on you, right? Like they're going to come to the people who they can rely on for this quality content.
Yeah. No, I appreciate this, man. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your advice, your knowledge, your experiences, what you've done, what you've learned, where you've overcome, where you're at today. And dude, you know, before we wrap it up, I want to leave the floor for you, for people to connect with you. Where's the best place for them to connect with you? You know, ask for your services or look for you, ask questions. Where would that be?
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Instagram is just rico.incarnati. You could shoot me a DM and be like, hey, Rico, I really hated everything you said on their podcast. Or you could be like, man, love what you said. That's the best place to reach me. I'm most active there. TikTok, same thing, Rico Incarnati. I also have a YouTube channel as well. It's just Enrico Incarnati. And those are probably the best 3 places you can connect with me and interact with me, and then we'll have a conversation.
Awesome. And last 2 questions. I'll start with the first one. What is the craziest and wildest experience you've ever had with one of the people you've worked with in your field?
I would say the Big Mac challenge with Jordan. That was the craziest experience. When we did the Big Mac challenge, so the whole story was he ate 1 Big Mac every single day and still lost 7 pounds doing so while being in a calorie deficit. And the cool thing that came from that was like, I got featured in like Forbes, Business Insider because of like the photos and everything. And I think just being able to see the people are like, oh fuck, I can actually do this with whatever favorite food I want, whether it's a cannoli, whether it's a donut, and it's like, oh shit, like that's cool, you know.
Oh, that's music to my ears when I hear people say that, man.
So.
I'm a big pizza guy.
And that whole journey. So to couple the crazy experience, we finished the talking point of that video. Actually, I don't think anyone knows this. So we we finished the like talking point of that video about like a day or two before we were scheduled to release it. And we had a hard release date, right? We're like, Sunday, this is going up no matter fucking what. And so that Saturday, I edited straight for like 13 hours on the video. And mind you, I knew, I'm like, this is going to be my best work yet. And so I wanted it to be like perfect. And so I probably didn't need to spend that much time, but I'm like looking at each clip so intentionally. And I'm like, okay, making sure we have the exact graphic for this, making sure we have the exact B-roll for this, and like making sure it's this day, making sure the text is right, spelling. So I was like super anal about everything, but I think that was ultimately the most rewarding piece of content, because once it went out, it was like, it was just, it took off.
Love it, man. Love it. Last question. What is the biggest piece of advice you can leave off to all our listeners today in one sentence?
Be a fucking shark.
Yeah, I love
Boom.
it. I love it.
Go out there and be sharks, everybody.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. Make sure you guys all follow him. He's a beast. You know, one of the best out there right now. Really love all of your content, man. I really, really do. Thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Until next time, guys. Peace.